Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. Donald Trump addresses the World Economic Forum in Davos as he reiterates his plans for the golden age of America and calls the last administration inept. Tens of thousands are told to evacuate parts of LA County after a new wildfire blasts through mountainous areas 45 minutes from the city. The British teenager responsible for killing 3 schoolgirls in Southport is sentenced to life in prison. The judge said it's unlikely he'll ever be released. And Emilia Perez, Wicked and The Brutalist received the most nomination at this year's Academy Awards. To our top story, and in the last hour, Donald Trump has addressed the World Economic Forum in Davos. During his speech, he spoke about his historic week and blamed Joe Biden for losing control of inflation as well as the borders. Trump also explained his reasons for pulling out of the Paris Climate Agreement and promised that America would be the best place to create jobs and also make products. Here's just some of what he had to say.
My message to every business in the world is very simple. Come make your product in America, and we will give you among the lowest taxes of any nation on earth. We're bringing them down very substantially, even from the original Trump tax cuts. But if you don't make your product in America, which is your prerogative, then very simply you will have to pay a tariff, differing amounts, but a tariff which will direct hundreds of billions of dollars and even trillions of dollars into our treasury to strengthen our economy and pay down debt.
Let's get the latest from our Washington correspondent, Caroline Malone. Caroline, Donald Trump, very critical of the last administration when it came to inflation and immigration, and he explained the reasons behind some of those executive orders this week. What were the main takeaways from his address in Davos?
So President Trump has talked about a lot of what he sees as the problems left from the last administration, President Biden, and how he has to fix all those issues, but also touted his own achievements only in the last few days since taking office just a few days ago and all that his administration have achieved, particularly when it comes to taking action to send troops towards the border to try and start dealing with what he sees as a big illegal immigration crisis. Also, DOGE, the Department of Efficiency, talking about how important that will be to reduce government spending because the last administration, he says, greatly overspent and left them in a lot of debt with a lot of interest to pay. I think in particular, though, what's been interesting from what he said in Davos is this focus that he has put on energy. We know, of course, that Donald Trump has talked about allowing oil and gas to have a resurgence in the United States, to lift any kind of bans there have been on new oil and gas digs, particularly because of environmental reasons. And that was one of the focuses that he had in this talk today. He spoke in particular about letting the people buy the cars they want and use the liquid gold under their feet. He says the US has the largest oil and gas reserves and they're going to be able to use it. He said also that he wants oil and gas prices to be reduced. He called in particular to OPEC countries to consider that and the importance of that in helping to deal with not just the price of oil and gas and therefore inflation, but also its impact on world wars such as in Russia and Ukraine being top of his agenda. He also spoke about AI, the push from the United States to create more AI business, more cryptocurrency business, to have more energy to be able to source that business and the importance he sees of that being central to the US economy going forward, and mentioned some of the deals that have been done with a number of companies over the last few days, whether it's SoftBank, or OpenAI, and the billions of dollars in deals that have been done to help in that cause.
Yes, definitely. Caroline, you mentioned it there earlier. He spoke about the immigration action at the US border. He said the mass deportation process had already started and he deployed US troops to assist with this. What more do you know?
Well, at the moment, there's a suggestion that something like up to 10,000 troops could be sent to the border regions, particularly with Mexico, to try and handle what the Donald Trump administration is trying to achieve in terms of numbers of deportations. We know that just in the last 24 hours, another 1,500 have been approved, so we haven't got up to that full number yet. But certainly putting it as a priority for the Department of Defense as well, for the Pentagon, to try and be on those borders in larger numbers. There's also been some suggestion that the customs enforcement groups will be involved in raids in different cities in the United States, ICE as they're known. But also, and we heard this from President Trump, particularly on his Fox News interview with Hannity just last night, that he may consider reducing funding for sanctuary cities. Sanctuary cities are basically places that protect immigrants, and particularly concerning to President Trump is if they might get in the way of any of these kind of raids that are being carried out to find illegal immigrants and potentially deport them. So talking about withdrawing money from sanctuary cities, if that's a type of obstacle that they face.
And let's just go to something a little bit different, but still about the Trumps. And we must say congratulations to Mr. and Mrs. Trump today. 20 years married. Was that the real reason he didn't go to Davos in person, do you think?
Well, he's certainly got a packed agenda from what we've seen from the White House poll today as well. So potentially quite a few events on his schedule, as well as spending time with his wife. But yes, I mean, we've seen photos released on this important anniversary of the two of them, particularly when they got married so many years ago. And also, of course, you know, she's been a highlight of a lot of the inauguration events, a lot of photos taken with fashionable outfits, her standing by Mr. Trump, and also their dance that they had at some of the numerous balls. So their relationship has featured somewhat, but I think also President Trump seems to have a very packed schedule when it comes to political and domestic events as well.
But he did manage to send her a nice message on social media. Caroline Malone in Washington, thank you so much for joining me. Now, Donald Trump also spoke about his conversation with Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. During the phone call, the Crown Prince said that the kingdom was willing to invest $600 billion in the United States over the next 4 years. Trump told the Davos summit he would be asking him to increase this to $1 trillion. Al Arabia's Washington correspondent Joseph Habush has more.
Ties between the United States and Saudi Arabia are off to a significantly better start than they were under the previous administration. This was evident during last night's call between President Donald Trump and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, which was the U.S. president's first call with a foreign leader since taking office on Monday. The call last night was detailed in a statement put out by the Saudi press agency, which said that the Crown Prince expressed willingness to increase investment with the U.S. by $600 billion over the next 4 years, and potentially increasing that number. This is the second pledge from a Gulf country, the first of which was made by DEMAC CEO Sain Sajwani of the United Arab Emirates, to the tune of $20 billion for investments in data centers across the United States. That pledge was made before President Trump took office. Separately, and this hasn't been reported as much, MBS had a call last night with the top U.S. diplomat Marco Rubio, with the U.S. side putting out a readout of the call. The two discussed bilateral ties and what the State Department said is this time of momentous change. The Secretary expressed Washington's ambition to increase bilateral ties with the kingdom and work on shared interest in Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, and elsewhere. Secretary Rubio also stressed the threat of Iran and its proxies, and he thanked Saudi Arabia for its role in promoting regional peace and stability.
Joseph Habush, our Washington correspondent for Al Arabiya News. Thank you. More than 31,000 Los Angeles residents have been evacuated as firefighters battle two new fast-moving blazes. The rapidly spreading fires threatening homes in his city still coming to terms with the loss of thousands of properties in the last few weeks. Nick Harper reports.
Another monster fire eating up California's hillsides. The Hughes fire has ravaged more than 10,000 acres, almost 40 square kilometres to the north of Los Angeles. 4,000 firefighters are working on the blaze, many going through the night. One silver lining, this latest flare-up is in the sparsely populated northern hills, away from busy communities.
We're not dealing with a large population and a large amount of residential homes, as we saw with those two fires. Out here, it's more sparsely populated. However, out here, we are dealing with high winds, which we also saw with the other fires.
By early Thursday US time, firefighters said the Hughes fire was only 14% contained. Strong winds are spreading the flames, but the weather is not as intense as 2 weeks ago, allowing aircraft to drop water and retardant on the affected areas.
We were able to put in tens of thousands of gallons of retardant on the south side of the fire because the fire was moving to the southwest. It was really the aircraft, in addition to all of those ground resources, which allowed us to get the upper hand.
Also threatened, the upmarket and densely populated Bel Air neighbourhood, in an area where real estate is valued in the tens of millions of dollars. The Palisades and Eaton fires from earlier this month are still burning, with firefighters managing to keep them largely contained. But people are still returning to count the cost of the destruction of entire neighbourhoods.
So this is my house that was about to celebrate its 100th birthday, and it's in rubble. It was a stucco Spanish-style house, which I would have assumed was somewhat fire resistant. It's, hard stucco, but in fact, no, it did not fare very well.
President Donald Trump is due to travel to LA on Friday to survey the damage. The president has already blamed poor fire management in the Democrat-controlled state, fanning the flames of partisan politics in the opening days of his new administration. Nick Harper, Al Arabiya News.
Life in prison for Axel Rudakubana, the British 18-year-old who murdered 3 schoolgirls at a dance class in Southport. During the sentencing, the judge said Rudakubana was never likely to be released and would serve a minimum of 52 years in jail. Let's go to our correspondent in London now, Stuart Smith. Stuart, thank you for joining me. Rudakubana wasn't actually there for the sentencing, and he'd been incredibly disruptive earlier today. Tell us what the judge said and his decision for the sentence given.
That's right. The trial was initially delayed after Axel Rudakubana claimed that he needed paramedics, that he was suffering from chest pain. He then later, once the hearing had already begun, made similar claims and then had to be removed as he was shouting for help. And then after lunch, when the hearing resumed a second time, he disrupted proceedings that had already begun, meaning that in the end, he didn't hear many of the victims' testimonies nor the sentencing remarks of the judge in the end. But what the judge said, and the point he was very keen to make, was that if Axel Rudakubana had been 18, been an adult by the time that he had committed these attacks, it would have been a slightly different situation, with him receiving a whole life sentence, as it's known in the UK, meaning there is no minimum term at which he can be released. In the end, because he was 17, just days before that attack, something the judge implied was something Axel Rudakubana did deliberately, that means the minimum time he spends in prison is 51 and a bit years. But a sentence which means, as the judge said, he is likely never to leave prison, as a parole board would have to go through that and decide he is no longer a risk. The judge made it clear that Axel Rudakubana had gone with the intention of causing as much shock and harm as possible, that his motivation was not connected to a political ideology, that it was connected with an attempt by Axel Rudakubana, a man obsessed with violence, to do as much harm as possible and to cause as much fear as possible for its own sake.
It was extremely emotional today outside the courthouse as I was watching that, and many of the victims' families were inside court today hearing those testimonies. What was their reaction to the sentencing of Rudakubana today?
Yeah, there was effectively, from reporters in the courtroom, a sigh of relief when that sentence was read out. One of the longest in history, the longest for a 17-year-old, it seems. It will come as some relief to these families that he received such a long sentence, but many of them shocked and disturbed at the evidence that was presented in court, such as photographs and details of the attack, some of which they had not heard before. The victims having an opportunity in court to read out their statements about how they had been affected, even though the defendant was not there to listen to them. Many of them talking about how their lives had been changed forever, parents talking about how their children could still not fully comprehend what exactly had happened to them, and some distressing testimony about how many of these children and some of the adults affected were no longer able to feel safe even at home. All of them seemingly talking about suffering mental trauma that will take a long time, if ever, to be resolved.
Stuart, Rudakubana has a history of violence, which was discussed in that court case and had been reported to authorities multiple times before this incident happened. Will lessons be learned? What are we hearing from the government?
The Prime Minister says that there will, and he said there will be an attempt to look at all public institutions and see where they failed, and he believes indeed they have, specifically when it comes to the UK's anti-radicalisation, counter-extremist system known as PREVENT, which is designed exactly to take these troubled children, teenagers, and they should be referred to this programme, and when they are meant to receive help that will prevent them from being further radicalised. He was, Axel Rudakubana, admitted to that programme 3 times, or referred to that programme 3 times, but in the end the concerns were not taken forward. There's an investigation going to happen into why that was. There's also going to be an investigation about what to do for these usually almost always young men who are radicalised into causing acts or desiring to cause acts of violence but seemingly have no ideology. Axel Rudakubana used an Al-Qaeda training manual to help inform him about how to kill those girls, said the judge, but he wasn't acting with any particular ideology, and that's a new challenge, the Prime Minister here in the UK says, for the counter-extremist services and the intelligence services about how to stop these kinds of attacks taking place.
Stuart Smith in London, thank you so much for joining me. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. The prosecutor of the International Criminal Court has applied for arrest warrants of 2 Taliban leaders in Afghanistan. They're accused of crimes against humanity for widespread discrimination against women and girls. There was no immediate comment by Taliban leaders on the prosecutor's statement. It will now be up to a 3-judge panel at the ICC to rule on the prosecution request, which has no set deadline. The first Turkish Airlines flight in 13 years has landed in the Syrian capital Damascus today. The plane arrived from Istanbul carrying aid and 345 passengers, including Turkish Airlines CEO Bilal Eski and officials. Qatar Airways was the first international carrier to announce it would resume Damascus services, which began on the 7th of January. Syrians returning home are having to navigate hundreds of landmines littered across the country from the Assad regime. The former government had reportedly planted thousands across the country, mainly on farmland. At least 144 people have been killed by them and other unexploded remnants since December, according to the Halo Trust. Ukraine is cracking down on the sale of illegal weapons and ammunition. Law enforcement agencies have conducted some 1,000 raids across the war-torn country. There have been concerns about weapons smuggling since Russia's 2022 invasion. Trump's envoy for special mission says NATO allies must pay their fair share before enlarging the group. Richard Grenell spoke on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos, calling out the Dutch specifically. Grenell said there was a risk of running into a big buzzsaw in America if the NATO Secretary General added Ukraine to the organization. And finally, it'll soon be more expensive to climb the world's tallest mountain. Nepal is set to charge $15,000 for those seeking to summit Mount Everest during peak season. That's up 36% from its current cost of $11,000. It is the first time the price has changed in nearly a decade. Now, the 2025 Academy Award nominations have been revealed in Hollywood today, with Emilia Perez nominated for the most amount at 13, making it the highest nominated foreign film in Oscar history. Conclave, The Brutalist and Wicked have also been recognized by the Academy, with a ceremony due to take place on the 2nd of March.
Unknown, Fred Berger.
So who exactly could walk away with those top gongs? Let's speak to film critic Larushka Zadeh. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon, or this evening, apologies. Let's start with Best Picture. 10 nominations. Tell us who you're tipping to win.
Yes, as you say, 10 nominations, but it's looking like it's emerging as a two-horse race. And the forerunners here, as you say, Emilia Perez, which is this crazy, out there Spanish language musical about a drug lord who's transitioning to be a woman. Don't get many of those coming along every day. But a very different film that is up against it is the film The Brutalist, which is this monumental, epic, 3.5-hour-long film about a Hungarian architect who escapes the Holocaust and comes to America in the 1940s and gets taken up by a wealthy industrialist. I sort of think of that as this year's Oppenheimer, which of course won last year. It's epic, it's huge, it's made to be meant in the cinema, it's dazzling. And what makes it extraordinary is that it was made for about 1/10 of Oppenheimer's budget, and it really doesn't look like it.
Oh, not quite sure what to say about that. But what about the Best Actress category? Many people, including myself, I was surprised that Angelina Jolie wasn't nominated for Maria, but Cynthia Evaro for Wicked, and of course Demi Moore for The Substance. And surely they could be the top two here?
Yeah, I mean, the Best Actress race this year has been a really hard-fought race with lots of what we call snubs, lots of surprises. Yeah, as you said, Angelina Jolie not in there. Other contenders people might have expected to see there. Nicole Kidman for Baby Girl, she's not there. Kate Winslet for Lee, she's not there. But as you said, we've got Cynthia Erivo, who did a powerhouse turn in Wicked, which, along with Emilia Perez, is another musical that's up there and that's nominated. But I think, yes, as you say, Demi Moore, who's got this wonderful comeback story. It's her first Oscar at the age of 62 for this very strange film, a body horror called The Substance, which is all about Hollywood ditching aging actresses. So the fact that as an aging actress, she's come back and she's got this new career renaissance is the kind of comeback story that Hollywood loves to get behind.
And when it comes to Best Actor, nods for Adrien Brody, Timothée Chalamet and Ralph Fiennes. Is Ralph Fiennes a favourite for this category, do you think?
I think Ralph Fiennes always puts in, an extraordinary term in whatever film he's in. And he's meticulous here in this film Conclave, where he plays a cardinal who is leading the secret election for the new pope. Conclave had the most nominations at the British Academy Awards recently. However, I'm not hearing a lot of buzz about his performance. He's excellent, but it's not a sort of show-off performance. I think Adrien Brody may well win for The Brutalist, but don't discount Timothée Chalamet, who is the young star also of Dune 2, which is another one of the nominated films, and he puts in this quite mesmerising turn as the young Bob Dylan for a biopic called The Complete Unknown, which is getting quite a surprising amount of love from the Oscar voters. But I think it goes to the Oscar voters demographic, because a lot of them grew up with Dylan, a lot of them are of that age, and I think that's the reason that this film is getting a lot of attention from them.
And finally, Best Supporting. First time for singer and star of Wicked, Ariana Grande, and also the Succession actor, Kieran Culkin. So what can we get from this?
Okay, well, I mean, I found that Ariana Grande, lots of people mainly know her as a pop star, a pop superstar, but she was quite a revelation in Wicked. She was beautiful as Glinda. She put in this wonderful comic turn of her performance. I think the favourite in this category is Zoe Saldana, who seems to be picking up a lot of attention for Amelia Perez. But yes, in terms of the actor category, fans of the acclaimed US TV show Succession will feel like they're getting a bit of a sequel here, because two of the co-stars, Kieran Culkin and Jeremy Strong, who played warring brothers in that show, are up against each other. They're competing in the best supporting actor category. So it'll be very interesting to see how they react on the night and who will take the final prize.
Film critic Larushka Evanvardi, thank you so much for joining me. Yes, Ariana Grande there. Let's take a look at some of the top business news. Now, the popular YouTube star Mr. Beast is holding discussions with several groups that are interested in buying TikTok. The internet's highest earning content creator, whose real name is Jimmy Donaldson, hasn't committed to any one effort but is speaking with multiple parties in hopes of attaching himself to a winning bid. Donaldson is one of many interested bidders for TikTok, which has just over 2 months to find a buyer for its US business or face a nation ban, and that nationwide ban is due to its links with China. Tesla is raising the prices of all its cars in Canada from next month, according to its website. The Model 3 costs are going up by as much as 9,000 Canadian dollars. Model Y variations will see increases of up to 4,000 Canadian dollars, while all variations of Model S and X will rise by the same amount. Tesla did not actually provide a reason for the surging prices. Sainsbury's is planning to cut more than 3,000 jobs across the UK. The supermarket said the move was a bid to save money ahead of a massive leap in costs from budget cut measures, which are due to come into force within weeks. Sainsbury's says head office and senior management roles are among those affected, adding that the cost-saving drive would also result in the closure of its remaining cafes, hot food and also pizza counters. Let's turn our attention to sports now, and Aryna Sabalenka is aiming to emulate Martina Hingis's 3 straight Australian Open titles between 1997 and 1999. Earlier today, she cruised into the final with a win over her very close friend, Paula Badosa. Sabalenka will face Madison Keys for the Grand Slam title. They've met each other 5 times on tour, with Sabalenka on 4 occasions, so she's won those matches. And Novak Djokovic is up against Alexander Zverev tomorrow in the semi-final. Manchester City have signed Omar Marmoush from Eintracht Frankfurt for £59 million. The 25-year-old has agreed a contract until June 2029, with add-ons rising to £4 million. The Egyptian forward has scored 15 goals in 17 Bundesliga games this season, second only to the England captain Harry Kane's 16 for Bayern Munich. He's expected to be available for Saturday's Premier League game, and that is against Chelsea. Staying with Man City, and the club's captain, Kyle Walker, has signed a loan deal with Italian club AC Milan for the remainder of the season. The agreement includes an option to buy the defender in the summer when the contract does come to an end. Walker, who has made 316 appearances for City, will now travel to Italy for a medical. A reminder of today's top stories. Donald Trump addresses the World Economic Forum in Davos as he reiterates his plans for the golden age of America and calls the last administration inept. Tens of thousands are told to evacuate parts of LA County after a new wildfire blasts through mountainous areas 45 minutes from the city. The British teenager responsible for killing 3 schoolgirls in Southport is sentenced to life in prison. The judge said it's unlikely he'll ever be released. And Emilia Perez, Wicked and The Brutalist received the most nominations at this year's Academy Awards. And that's all from us on W News. Thank you for joining us. Hadley Gamble is coming up next with a special interview with the former Saudi Arabian Foreign Minister Adel Al-Jubeir. And don't miss Tom Burgess-Watson with GNT. Good night.